A flood of intros for us.
Good. Tell us what's going on, Paul.
Kind of a traditional time of year, being Chicago. Kids outdoor team activities wrap up in mid-October. So we actually generally see more of a boost then than I do back to school time, just because schedules open up. And I would have to say that, you know, with all the advice given about precautions and stuff, the last several intros, the one last night, he was specific. He just said, my kids need something, and I don't know that I trust team sports right now, and you guys look like you're taking it seriously, and I trust that my kids could be safe there. I've actually heard that quite a bit from people coming in. So kudos to everything you guys have taught us to do with it.
So perfect to hear. I mean, it's almost a picture book, you know what I mean? I mean, it's just how we want it scripted, you know? We want them to get that feeling, and that's why we talked about even doing that video of for the intros to give them that peace of mind of how people are walking in and doing them that visual. I know when Delfino put his up, he said it helped his enrollments tremendously. He was having a trouble on the show rate on the intros, and then once he started implementing that, his show rate got so much better, and of course his enrollments too.
Yeah, and we attach that, and I even hear from parents too that they seem to scroll our Facebook page almost like a website just to get an idea of, you know, culture. And I've heard that mentioned too, like, yeah, you attach the video because we did the same thing. And I looked at your Facebook posts and stuff, and because I try to do during the week, just take pictures, you know, having fun, staying safe, and they can see everybody's masked and distant. And they've mentioned that it looks like we're taking it seriously, and they trust coming in.
And I tell you, I noticed it myself when, you know, several months ago when things started opening back up for restaurants and things. And I saw some commercials on TV for our local restaurants, and they were showing how they go in and sanitize and how they do, you know, the lines coming in and the tables and separation. I mean, and all of that gave me, I said, okay, I'm going to go to that restaurant. And that's the same thing that, you know, your people that you're marketing to that's the same fuzzy feeling that they're going to get, because I tell you, on our Mastery Advanced group today, we were talking, Paul Pendergrass, his daughter is in a psychologist, and was dealing with these issues that parents were having with kids during this pandemic. And the reason that they were having those issues is because kids are cooped up. They're not getting to go out and mingle among their friends. They're not able to go, most of them, to a live school. You know, public schools are mostly doing virtual, even though there's a few that are doing, you can go for 1 or 2 days. So all of those things help. And, you know, in your marketing and your intro, that's all part of getting those people in there. And Delfino, just before you came on, we were talking about that video you put together for the intros about, and tell everybody how you filmed that. And you, if you don't have one, we probably should have Delfino post it again, because it's a very critical thing for you to have. And tell everybody how hard that was to do. And I know it was easy. So tell them a little bit about it and how you did it and what the video looked like.
Are you talking about the one following the CDC guidelines?
Yes.
Okay.
The one you were sending to the intros, where you had them walk through what they looked like when they came in the door and how they filled out the paper and how you checked their temperature and you did, you know, all that social distance and all that for the intro.
Okay. We had our program director pretty much take us from the time they stepped to the door all the way till they went into the private room. During that time, she does show them our dojang. She shows how we're marked 6 feet apart. Temperatures are taken. Every kid has to sanitize their hands When they come in, they have to wash their hands. When they go out, they come in through one door, leave through the other. So she, excuse me, she explains all this during the video, and it's helped quite a bit. Every intro that we've scheduled, she sends that to them, and we've had positive comments. Before that, we would have parents that would schedule and asking us how we were keeping safe, and we would, text them. But this video, we just send it as soon as they make that appointment, or actually as soon as we contact them, we send them that video, and it's helped the no-show rate, I think, quite a bit.
Great.
So,
And then I know you put together another one, which you guys, was aimed, we were trying to also aim something at getting those people re-engaged that weren't coming in, that were either your dropouts or the one that were still online and didn't want to come into the school because they were nervous about it. And then you put that video together that was aimed more at getting the ones that aren't coming in live more comfortable with to see what you're doing and how you're following all the guidelines. So keep those things in mind, that they become very, very important during this pandemic. And I tell you, the longer this goes on, I have a feeling that it's going to be even easier to get these intros into your school, because now I'm sure some of the parents were thinking back earlier that, oh, well, they'll be back playing football or basketball or baseball or something soon. So we don't need to do any other physical activity. We'll just wait and see kind of thing. And now the anxiety and the psychological problems they're having. And Paul was going to put together a video and with some testimonials, and also from his daughter, who's considered an expert in the field, talking about kids' anxieties and why they need to exercise, and why they need to be safe in a safe environment where they're comfortable and have that support around them. So as soon as he gets his done, and we talked about how to market that too, which was a combination of utilizing it for intros, utilizing it for old intros or leads that you had, kind of to get them re-engaged, your dropouts, to get them re-engaged, to your current students that aren't coming in live, to get them more comfortable with coming in live. But all those things are very important. So thanks for sharing that, Paul. And Delfino, if you could just repost that for everybody. There might be a few that haven't seen it, and I think it would be beneficial. If you don't have that, make sure that you do put one of those together. How long did that take y'all to put together, Delfino?
It took us maybe about 10, 15 minutes, and that's with us having to stop and redo it a couple of times. It didn't take long at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's like anything else. You just do it live, just like you're doing it with somebody. And you had, people playing, their role of it. And, you could have a parent with a child, you could have an adult. It's whatever your target market is that you're aiming for. I mean, you could even have a family come in and do it. So whatever your main target market is. And I know Rachel this month. Tell us again, Rachel, how your month was shaping up.
Yes, sir. We had 22 enrollments and actually 11 renewals. We got another leaders renewal last night, so that bumped up. We got another
Awesome.
Oh, and another enrollment. Just kidding. We're at 23 and 11.
Okay, great. And where were these? We know where the renewals were coming from, right? But where were the enrollments coming from?
Let me look. We actually had quite a few drive-by, and then some of the Facebook, but most of them are because we are doing a fundraiser with the local elementary schools. So all that the schools had to do was pass out the flyer, and it's 4 weeks of karate for $49. The classes are either at our location or virtual, and then all the proceeds go back to the school. And then, of course, when they come in, they do their introductory class, and we treat them just like a normal lead. So we meet with them and do an enrollment conference in the beginning, and a lot of them have enrolled. So that's where a lot of those came from.
And those 22, those weren't the ones that did the $49 thing. Those were the ones that actually signed up for your basic program?
Yeah, so yeah, the ones that paid the full down payment and registered for the year program.
And what are you getting now for your down payment and your monthly?
Our down payment is $299, and then our monthly is $247.
Okay, so you're getting over $500. And as Master Oliver tells you guys, remember, that's almost, that's your seed money. You know what I mean? That's your money to throw into your Facebook marketing, where you can go after these leads. You know, we are limited a little bit on a lot of the live activities that we used to do, even though things are opening up a little bit. Tell us a little bit more, Rachel, about your school program and how you got that going.
Yes, sir. So actually, a lot of times I do those at Master Lab and did set up all the school programs this time. But we've done the program several times in the school as an after school fundraiser, where we go to the school and teach the class there, and the kids just stay after school. And like I said, we print all the flyers and bring them to the school mails them out. And a lot of times they'll post on their Facebook page or send out an email flyer through Peach Jar if you give them a digital copy of the flyer as well, because when they know all the proceeds go to them, they're going to do as much as possible to help you promote it. And so we brought all the flyers, and a few of the schools let us do 2 rounds of flyers. Some of them just wanted to do one. We had one school who just wanted to do a digital flyer because the principal was worried about papers being handed out in COVID. But then, of course, with COVID, no one's allowed in the schools. The schools are on lockdown. So no, we couldn't come into the school to teach. But when we offered the virtual option and for them to come to our school, the schools jumped on it.
And of these ones, of the ones that you're doing in the after school, this $49 program, are those all live or some of them virtual?
We have virtual option, but I don't think we've had a single person who chooses to do virtual. And I think that's just kind of, these kids are all going in person to the schools. I think maybe if we reached out to the county virtual school and did it through them, we would get some doing it virtually. But we haven't had anyone who wants to, we give them that option, but nobody has wanted to do virtual. If they're comfortable going to school, I think they're comfortable coming in.
That's a really good idea, though, what you just said. We should
I know, I thought of it as soon as I said
do that. Everyone should do that. That's a really good idea.
Yeah, tell them again, Jan.
You're muted.
What she said is, we haven't gone to the virtual schools and offered this. And we need to specifically go to even though the schools send it out virtually to their virtual students, but there's programs that are virtual only that we
Right.
should probably be pushing through there.
Yeah, and that's the real key, is that, you know, Rachel and Jan have been getting good enrollments, but they're not just putting everything in Facebook. They're still going out and going through their other avenues of marketing. And that's what, we've been trying to preach to you guys is, when we say how much marketing do you need to do? Because I've had people ask me, well, how many different things should I be doing? Well, granted, we can say 15 or 20 things or do as many as you can. But my answer to that is you do as many as you need to do to get the number of enrollments that you want to get. And when you say, I just want to get as many as I can, that's not a goal. See, that's like asking one of our white belts about getting their black belt, and we say, you know, do you want to get your black belt? And they say, well, I want to go as far as I can. See, that's not a real goal, but a black belt is a goal because there's a deadline, a timeline to it. So every time you make a goal, there's a deadline and there's a checks and balance system of keeping on track. See, we don't just set the goal and say, I'm going to get 20 enrollments for October, and then wait till the end of the October and say, well, I only got 10, so maybe I'll do something different next month. What you have to do is keep on track of those goals on a daily or a weekly basis. So when I get to the end of the first week, if I haven't gotten at least 5 of my 20, then I got to redirect and rechange my goals. So, you know, that's the real key here. And, you know, our goal for you guys is to be $1 million school. And we know what it takes to be $1 million school. How many times have I said that? Rachel, how many active students do you have now?
300 exactly.
300 exactly. So she's back at her 300 mark. And okay, now she could have had 317 if she didn't have any dropouts this month. You see what I mean? But I'm going to tell you, when you have 300 students and you have just 3% dropout, you've lost 9 students. Well, it looks like she lost 17 this month. So maybe she's in the, let's see, that would be more like a 5% dropout rate, you see? So if you want to grow your school faster, and what was the formula that I told everybody to be $1 million school? I said 300 student value, average, and 300 active students. Rachel, how many active students do you had? 300 active students now, you said. What was your average student value?
291.
Okay. But what was your gross? What are you going to gross in October?
October's not great. It's we're looking at almost 80. But a lot of those down payments put on their billing for next month. So I just called, and our billing alone is estimated to be about 70 next month.
Okay. And Master Oliver preaches all the time, guys, whatever you're doing in your billing, you've got to be doing at least 50% more of that in-house. And how do you get the in-house up? Well, she said she had 23 enrollments, and we know she was a little over 500 for each of those. So that would have given her, where's my mathematicians? That would have given her over 10,000 down. And then she had 11 renewals. And what are you doing down on your renewals?
We charge $997 down on the renewals. And that's what most of those went on. They scheduled the payment for in a couple people.
And what is the down payment? $997 is the initial. And then what is the monthly on your leadership?
$390.
And you see, guys, when you have your basic price is $249, is it? Did you say? What is your basic?
Yes, they're $249.
So if you have $249, and everybody needs to write these two numbers down. Write down, what am I charging on my basic program? And then what is my white belt scholarship price on my black belt leadership? And hers is $390. So that's, in other words, what she's getting, not what they pay if they don't renew at white belt, but we want to go for that white belt scholarship. If you add those two together, and that's 4,650. So that's what, 325 or 340, something in that range is your average student value. And keep that in mind. That's kind of where you can work to. Because if you take your lowest price program, you know everybody's going to be there. And then if you take your higher price, the way that averages starts going up higher is when you start renewing a higher percentage. That's why Master Oliver's always talking about 80% of your students should be renewed. And if you can renew 80% of your students, then that means most of your students are going to be paying that higher price of $390, and only 20% are going to be paying that lower of $247. You follow me? And so whatever your two numbers are, whatever it is, divide it by 2, and then know that that's kind of where you should be aiming for. And we want that to be at least 300, because if you have a 300 student value average and you have just 200 students, well, we know that that's a $60,000 school. Well, we know at 60,000, there's not anybody on the meeting that would not be profitable at 60,000. We know that most schools, even the ones with the bigger rents and higher payrolls, usually 30 is a high mark for a break even after paying all payrolls and everything. So it's key that you keep that in focus, and that way we can get that student value up. We can grow that school. And you know, the biggest problem I see with schools not getting to 300 quickly is they're not keeping good retention, 1, and 2, they're not marketing to get enough enrollments. Now, if I take those 2, look at Rachel's this month. She had 23 enrollments. So maybe that makes 301 now, Rachel. But if she had before that, you were at 294, was it? Was that the number?
292.
292. And then she added 23. And then we subtracted out the dropouts. And she was still, then her enrollment this month was a net 8. Now, why is it important to know what your net enrollment is every month? So that way you can project how at the end of 2020, in a year, how many new students do I want to have? In other words, if I started in January with 200 and I want to be at 300 by December, then all I need to do is have a net 100 students divided out. That's like where she's at. That's 8. See, at your number that you did this month, Rachel, you're on track to add another 100 students to your school in 12 months. Well, it's important for you to know that, because if you want to be $1 million school and you want to get to 300 students, well, if I'm at 150 and I can have an 8 net enrollment each month, then I can be pretty close. I'll be in that 250, 260 range by 1 year. So keep in mind that active count is very critical. Now, I'll tell you the number that you guys, most of you probably don't even know, that you should know if you want to control your business, and that is you need to know what your student value is right now. And Rachel, tell them how you found out that 290 something was your student value.
We took the average, the monthly average gross, and then divided by the current number of students we have.
Exactly. So if you take your average monthly gross year to date, and then you divide it by your number of active students you have right now, and that's why I like to do that always at the first of the month, because that's kind of that last chance. And what do we call, everybody make sure you know what is classified as an active student and what classifies somebody as a dropout. Bruce, can you tell us that?
I think a dropout is when they've been inactive for 3 or 4 weeks in a row. You don't count them as active anymore.
Okay, don't say 3 or 4.
Oh,
Just
4
say
weeks. I'm gonna say
30
4
days.
weeks.
If they haven't been there for a month, 30 days. And that's why when we did when we designed that 3-card box system probably 40 years ago, is that right, Master Oliver? Maybe even longer. When we divided,
I believe I stole it from you when you implemented it at Annandale in 1983, probably. If I were to remember, there were a couple of other iterations ahead of that, but that was the current iteration was more or less.
Yeah, we've
80.
changed the card a little bit, but that box system, it was we called it the 3-box system. And box 1 is everybody on Monday is everybody's in box 1 and alphabetized. And then when they come to class, we sign the card, we put it in box 2. So on box 2, it says second class or more. Box 1 says first class. So the first class you come in during the week, your card is in box 1. The second or more class you come in this week, your card will be in box 2. So what that means, at the end of the week, we don't have to go through all the boxes. All I have to do is look in box 1, and every card that's left in box 1 at the close of business on Saturday, I know they haven't been in, because if they were, their card would have been moved into box 2. You follow me? So I take all those cards out. I then take them in the office under a microscope, which means that it sits on my program director's desk right by the phone, so he can remember to call them on every opportunity he has, with a sticky note on the front of the card, so he can make his notes of when he called, what conversations, when they're coming back, what they said. So you have an ongoing thing. And then that box 3 in the office has week 1, week 2, week 3, and then week 4. So once they get to week 4, they are now considered a dropout. So when I'm counting my active count on the first of the month, I have to go to, and it should be all the cards now are in box 1. I count all those. There's no cards in box 2. And then in the office, I've got to also count week 1, week 2, week 3, because we're still counting them as active because they haven't hit the full month of inactive. So they still count too on your active count. Now, the reason I put it in the 1, 2, 3 week, I kind of did it off my baseball days. It's like 3 strikes and you're out. So week 1, you get a chance to get them back in before you move them into week 2. And if you're moving them into week 2, because we always do those changes on a Monday, we go through, get all the new ones that are in box 1 that didn't come. We put them in week 1, but before we do that, we take all of week 1 and put it in week 2, etc. You see how that goes? And that keeps you so organized, and it keeps your dropout so much under control if you utilize trying to get a hold of them. Now, that's where the program director's job, or one of his assistants or hers, and that is to text, to call, to email, to send a card. You know, you've seen those cute little cards that have a little karate thing on it that said, "We've missed you." Or it has one of the guys with a dusty gym bag with flies on it, like he hasn't been in, hadn't used his bag. So contact him, and then you got an opportunity before they go into week 2 or 3.
Hey, if you don't mind, sorry I was a little late here. Why don't we take a deep breath and go back and recap for everybody, because you've covered a lot of ground, right? So why don't we recap for a second and see, it's really the starting point here, and we say it all the time, but now we're getting into real brass tacks, right? Is you have to operate your business by numbers. And if you don't know, how many people are dropping out every month, where they are, what's happening there, how many leads, how many appointments, if you don't know all those numbers, you really don't have a clear understanding of where the gaps are. And what I find is what your intuitive expectation is of what's going on in your school is almost always wrong. Almost every instructor thinks, oh, all my students love me and I hardly ever lose anybody. And the ones who argue that point most aggressively usually are losing 7, 8, 9% a month. And in fact, I can go back over many, many years. The schools that had like the floor and the instructor and the dynamicism that everybody else was pointing out was the example of how things should look, almost always had the highest dropout rate because that wasn't the key factor in retention. So, but let's go back and recap some of these things that Master Smith and Rachel were going through here with you. Number one is the idea of student value, right? And when we start looking at the dials and tuning all the dials, everyone says to us initially, if I could just get 5 more new students a month, if I could just get 10 more new students a month, if I could just, suddenly get 100 new students a month, everything would be right with the world. But really, the two missing ingredients for most schools are their average value per student and their dropout rate. So if you can cut the dropout rate in half and you can double the average revenue per student, right there, you multiplied the gross by 4 times without even worrying about marketing and everything else. Is that a fair way to say it, Master Smith?
Absolutely. And that's the key that a lot of people are missing. We grow our school with new enrollments, but we grow quicker with better retention. See, it's not a matter of you won't grow because some schools, we have more students than we did last year. Yeah, but look how many you lost that you could have, if you would have just improved that from 7 or 8% down to 4 or 5 or 3%, you would have had another 50, or you might have had another 100. Makes a big difference.
Yeah. So the numbers you were using is we were talking about the average student value per month. And a lot of times you'll hear us talk about lifetime student value. And the way to calculate those things and write it down, make sure you're really clear, is if you take what your average monthly gross is and divide it by the average number of active students, that gives you what the average student is paying per month in dollars and cents. And that's the number that's actually being deposited in the bank, the amount of money you have there to pay the rent and so forth, right? This isn't contract amount, projected value. That's the actual amount that somebody's going to pay you per month. And that's a number that we want to get to $300 a month or more. The second number is that lifetime value. And what we're doing is taking the annual gross and dividing it by the average monthly active count, right? So it's how much you grossed over a 12-month period. It can be, most accurate, go back a rolling 12 months. In other words, at the end of October, I go October back to November last year and so forth, right? But what my annual gross is divided by, not the active count, I'm sorry, I misstated that, but divided by the number of enrollments of new students, right? So if I look at that number, our target is to be over 6,000, preferably in the $7,000, $8,000 range. And that literally is an approximation for what the next new student in the door is going to pay on average between down payment on enrollment, monthly payments on the enrollment, down payment on renewal, monthly payments on the renewal until they drop out. So it averages out, somebody pays their down payment, doesn't pay the first month payment and then drops out, with the person who enrolls, pays 3 months, renews, pays in full for the renewal. Averages all of that out, right? So another number that Matt Smith likes to use
Before
is
you
what
come up that number, Master Oliver, could we just make sure everybody wrote this down right? So Master Oliver said the total gross for the year, and then we're going to divide that by the total number of enrollments, not net enrollments, but the total number of enrollments you had for the whole year.
Yeah,
So you just take every month, how many people enrolled, and then we're going to divide that into that gross, and that's on the average how much that is going to be the average lifetime value that all of your enrollments will be spending. So you know how much every enrollment, and when Master Oliver says you can spend up to 300 or 400 on a enrollment, you could, if the lifetime value of your school is $5,000 to $7,000, then that enrollment is that's like gold. It is worth that because that's what your school is generating.
Yeah. One of the single most profitable schools I saw, like in the old days, 10, 15 years ago, was Keith Hafner. And his number really was he was spending $1,200 to get a new student, and each one of them was worth $5,000. So he knew, and he was spending like $12,000 a month in advertising to run a school doing 1.2, 1.4 million. And of that 12,000 in advertising, that was generating 10 to 12 new students a month for him. And the other, he was doing 22 new students, but the other 10 were all internal referrals and so forth that weren't part of the advertising budget, right? So when you start looking at it, he felt very comfortable putting out very expensive direct mail, one thing or another, because he knew when somebody paid him the initial enrollment, if it cost $1,200, he was going to end up long-term getting $5,000 or $6,000 in revenue. So let's start with those two numbers: the average monthly value per student and the average lifetime value per student. And obviously those are directly correlated, right? And really, if you took the average monthly value times 12, those really should be the more or less coming at the same number. But so we want to get to over 6,000 for the lifetime value, and we want to get to 300 or more for the average monthly value. And you heard Rachel saying, what was the number, Rachel? 297 or something like that. Now, the first thing that happens when people hear those numbers is they say, oh my God, there's no way that I could ever charge that in my area. My students would never pay that. That could never be done in my area. And perhaps this is preaching to the choir, because most of you may be over that reaction. But we hear that a lot. We hear, we've had schools who were in the financial district in Manhattan, and schools that were in Silicon Valley, and schools that were in any place in between, but in their locations like that, have some excuse for why they thought people wouldn't pay that. And we've had schools in Dodge City, Kansas, and Mankato, Minnesota, where people were paying $247 or $297 for a new enrollment, with $400 plus $297 to enroll, and then paying $497 a month for leadership. So we have to kind of start with that, of getting through the noise in your mind of whether they're willing to pay that, and realize it's all about building value and building relationship. And if you build value and build relationship, number one, and number two, if you fish in the right pond, in other words, you market, if you're marketing to Section 8 housing and to the trailer park, you're going to have trouble with those tuition rates. But if you're marketing to, upper middle class, two-parent households for kids, for instance, then you won't have any problem with that if you build the other pieces in place, right, Master? So those were two of the important numbers: lifetime value and the average monthly value. The average monthly was the monthly gross divided by your active count. The lifetime was the annual gross divided by how many new enrollments you did that year, right? The other number you talked about, Matt Smith, and you kind of went through it pretty quickly, but Rachel, you said that your billing is looking like next month it'll be 70,000. Did I catch that right?
Yes, sir, because they have a lot of those down payments on there.
Okay, but the monthly billing looks like it'll be 70.
Our monthly billing is normally about 60.
Okay.
They scheduled their down payments through the billing company. That's why it's going to be about
Oh, I
70.
see. So that's a skewed number, but okay. So let's say 60. Matt Smith, you mentioned it before. What I've always liked to do is, if the billing is 60, I want to target us grossing 120, right? So doubling it. Worst case is, if the billing is 60, we're going to gross 90. And that ratio is important because if a school is doing, let's say, 50,000 a month and their billing is 10, that's a school that's not very stable, right? You're having to stress to get cash every month. You're having months where you have a bad month and you're stressing to make the rent, all that kind of stuff. That's not a very stable school. On the flip side, if you push everybody into billing and you've got 90% of your revenue coming in from billing, what we found over and over and over again is that means you're leaving a lot of money on the table. What you should be doing is getting a bigger down payment when they enroll or initial tuition, a bigger initial tuition for the renewal. You should be doing a higher percentage of renewals paid in full, not necessarily enrollments, but the renewals. And so you look at all of those moving pieces to say, okay, I've built the billing up. Now let's make sure that I'm doing enough cash in house. And again, in their case, if I was grossing 60,000 a month just at the start of the month with the billing, I'd be trying to do 120 every month, right? And figuring out where's my gap from if I do 60 in billing and I only do 80. Well, I'm way low on cash in house. What am I missing? And it's usually in not doing enough paid in full renewals or not doing big enough down payments. Is that a fair recap of that, Master Smith?
Yes, sir. And there's one thing I'd like to remind everybody, and it's something that I used to harp on my schools about, and I would really see, you have to realize that if your monthly billing is, I don't care whether it's 50 or 60 or whatever it is, but if you're gross in the school total with the billing, so in other words, your total gross for the month is just barely above what your billing is, I would get so upset with my staff from that school because I would tell them they're doing nothing but living off the fat of the land. And they say, what do you mean by that? And I said, because all the money that you took in this month, we wrote last month. So that was already coming in. I could have put a box in the front of the school for somebody to come in new and put money in there, and we wouldn't have done any better. What you have to do is take control of the gross, extra gross in your school. So somebody says to me, well, how can I get the gross of my school up? How could I possibly make, if my billing is 60,000, how could I possibly make 30 to another 60 in the school? Well, let's look at Rachel, for instance. Rachel did 23 enrollments. That generated 12,600 in down payments for the month. So now she did an extra 12,000 in-house. Then she did 11 renewals. Well, with just her 1,000 down, not even counting the next month's tuition, because sometimes on renewals, I'll renew them and they've already paid their monthly tuition this month. So I'm not going to make them pay another monthly payment. It won't hit till next month, but I want to get that down payment. And so she did 1,000. So that's 11,000. So that gave her 23,000 already. 23,000 on top of whatever her billing was. She'd already done. Well, where's she going to get the other? Well, let's say she had 1 or 2 paid in fulls. Well, we know paid in fulls are anywhere from 5 to 20,000 a piece. So she could have easily, off of getting 1 or 2 paid in fulls out of 300 students, she could have easily got another 10 to 20,000. That would have put her at 43,000 in-house to match her 60 that she did if she just sat on her butt the whole month and did nothing. You see how critical that other part is really what you work. That's working. That billing, you already worked. That, we already got the pat on the back for that. Good job. You got your billing up to this month. You did a great job last month. What did you do this month? How much money did you bring in-house? Because that money only comes if you go out and generate it. You don't just sit there and wait for the money that you already signed the contract on and wait for that to come in. But I've got to go out and get new enrollments. I've got to go out and get new renewals. I've got to go out and get a couple paid in fulls. And I'm going to tell you, it is not hard to get 2 or 3 out of 300 students to pay in full. That's 1% of your student body. So if I got 3 paid in fulls, and Rachel, you know, you've done paid in fulls before. What kind of impact did that have on your gross?
Oh, it was awesome. That's why we had, what was our last month, last December? We had a huge, it was our biggest month ever because
I
we had
think
a
you
ton
did
of paid in fulls.
122 maybe.
Somewhere around there.
Yeah, I know you were shooting for the 120 mark, and I think Jana actually, I think she made it. I mean, I know you guys numbers.
130. It was 130.
You hit 130?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. See, and so how does a school make 130 and then turn around the next month and just do your monthly billing? You follow me? So
Yes,
guys,
sir.
how much, look and see if you're working or if you're just sliding, if you're coasting. You know, you're either going to be working and trying to get that gross up, or you're going to be just coasting and just raking it as it goes. You don't have to work for anything. So the way you do that is I look for October. Everybody, I want to make sure you do this. You go into your October total gross, and then you put how much of that was billing and how much was down payments and first month's tuition on an enrollment, how much was down payment or first month's tuition or next month's tuition, whatever, on that renewal, and how much money came in from there. Then how much money did I get from paid in fulls? Maybe I did something else that I get money for, and some of you charge testing fees, or you do a little, some kind of extracurricular thing for the students that they pay for. Whatever that is, that's money in the school. So you add all that together, and if it's not at least 30% of your billing, 50% of your billing, then you are coasting. You are not working. You've got to be a little aggressive in this business. You know, martial arts teaches you confidence to be able to defend yourself, but it also, it has a positive type of aggressiveness that you need to not be afraid to go after something. So utilize, you know, your mental state that you've developed in the martial arts, and let's go after and let's get at least 50%. And if you do 60 or 70, then like Rachel and Jan did last December, look at the difference. Their billing was about 60, they did 130, so they did over 100%. They more than doubled it, you see, and that's what makes the difference between a record month and then just sliding along laterally.
And Master, before we pause for a second, anybody lost or have any questions about this so far? Is this all making sense? And so when we start talking about student value, the other number that I like to look at, and this is purely a marketing frame of reference, frankly, is getting it where when they enroll, they're paying you $400 or $500 plus the first month. So it's a substantial, and I prefer to say initial tuition, but substantial down payment. The reason for that is twofold. One is it just accelerates your cash flow. That's that, you know, doing cash in-house piece of it. But the other piece is purely self-interest on our part. Is it's a way for us to get you comfortable spending more and more money on marketing. Is if you know that the average revenue per student is going to be, say, $6,000, but you also know that you're going to get $600 the day they enroll, and it costs you 500 in advertising to get that enrollment, then it makes you more comfortable with, well, whatever they gave me initially, I'll put that back in to get another one, and then just keep cycling it that way. Does that make sense? So in that way, if I do 20 enrollments a month and it costs me $600 to get an enrollment and I get $600 from each of them, well, I mean, that starts to be that $12,000 a month number that we were talking about with Keith. Now, in most of your cases, you may not need to spend anywhere near that much in order to get as many enrollments as you want. In other cases, you do. We've been pretty lucky recently that Facebook has been generating our cost per enrollment has been well below that, say, $600-700 number. However, I don't expect that to last. All of the online marketing sources, whether it's pay-per-click on Google, Facebook, and so forth, they are all trending up on cost per click and cost per enrollment long term. And this year is an anomaly, given how much ad budget pulled out of the market with the pandemic. But on an ongoing basis, you expect that number to keep trending up, and you want to be okay with that number. So if it's costing you $200 right now on Facebook to get an enrollment, but if that went up to $600, that's okay too, because you're getting the money back the day that they enroll. Matt Smith, the other one that I wanted to go back to and explain to them is the AB box system, or the 1-2 box system. Is, and this is probably redundant for most of you, but let's walk through it again. Is one thing I always hear, Master Smith, you hear this, is, oh, we have this tricky, wonderful, fabulous software system, and we walk around with our iPad and we scan them in, or we have them scan their card at the front desk, and that keeps track of everything. Well, I have spent more hours and more money than almost anybody in our industry developing our own internal software package and looking at other software packages, and I'm a complete computer geek. And I've got to tell you, I've never gotten the effectiveness of software to equal having the physical ID cards. Two reasons. An old computer programming term, all the way back to when I was programming with Fortran with punch cards. And you guys probably have no idea what I'm talking about, but you'd sit down and do punch cards and you put them in the machine and then feed them through, and then a mainframe would go run them overnight. But the term was GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. What happens so much of the time with software is people get missed. They get either double counted, and the software can account for that a lot of times, or they don't get counted. And then the numbers in the software, the numbers in the cloud aren't right. But the other thing that happens is, and it's a very tricky programming process to do this, is I rarely see any software package that's giving the instructor on the floor useful information in real time. You know what I mean by that? Is if somebody pulls up the ID card, I can be making notes on the ID card. I know how many lessons they came in. I have the dates of when their lessons were. I have a graphic with the card, so I know that they missed 2 weeks and we're working on making it up. I have all kinds of information on that physical ID card that's difficult to replicate. I can go back 20 years. We did a software package, and it was designed where it spit out an instructor report, and they knew who needed stripes and who had missed class and one thing or another. And it printed out a program directory report, and it was everybody who's supposed to be in this class that's missing to call them. And I got to tell you, none of that stuff ever worked nearly as well as having the physical ID card. So if you have a software package that you're in love with, some are good, some aren't so good. If you have a software package that you're in love with, just print out a label on the ID card, put it on the ID card, and assign somebody to scan them all in at the end of the night so that they go into the software package and they're in the cloud. But use the ID card for the instructor to be able to look at everybody, to know when they need stripes, when they're testing, what their progress is, have they missed classes, and also have it there so the instructor can hand it off to branch manager or program director for them to know this person needs to be renewed, this one needs a progress check. Oh, by the way, this one has a sticky note. Their payments, their payment didn't go through, I need to talk to them, right? All of that stuff is facilitated by the ID card.
And Master Oliver, that ID card, like you said, it becomes so critical that what I would do is, as the head instructor, whoever was the head instructor would be collecting all the cards. So he would have all the cards. When I divide up the class, I can divide it up based on ages from the cards. I can divide it up on number of lessons from the cards. And then I'll give one instructor a set of cards, and those are going to be the ones he's going to be working with. I might give another set to another instructor, and he's going to work with them, depending on whether I'm dividing it into 2 groups or 3 groups in our family basic class. But what's critical that I tell everybody to use the card for is our progress checks. You know, they should be done timely. And then we mark the card on the day that they get that progress stripe on their belt. We also circle when we spotlight them. We circle their class to show. So I can look at any card. I can see how many lessons are circled. I know how many times that child has been spotlighted. And you know what happens is I'll go through the card box and I'll see a half a dozen cards that haven't been spotlighted. Well, how can we renew somebody if we haven't been pre-framing them? And part of that pre-framing is to spotlight them, to put them on a pedestal, to make them feel good. And so those cards do so many more things. I can look to see if they're on track for testing. Does it look like they're behind a few classes? Our program directors will put a sticky note on a card if he needs to talk to a parent about a payment or something. And he doesn't say on there, I need to talk to the parent about a payment. He'll just say, I need to talk with Tom's mom or dad. And then we know in the class to go over to Tom. If Tom's mother's not there, then we will have one of our assistants follow him and get that information to that parent to let them know that they need to talk to the program director.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's we'll set the testing appointment. And when we set that a testing appointment for the new belt, we'll put that on their card so we know that they have made an appointment for their testing for their new belt. So there's so many things that we can teach you about those cards that become so critical to that 3% or better retention that will make your school grow to that 300 plus active count even sooner. Because remember, the bottom line is every month, what is that net enrollment?
Yeah, but then to explain those numbers that you went through earlier, is what we'll have site 1, site 2. At the beginning of the week, all the cards are in site 2, and I apologize for repeating this again, but I want to make sure everybody's got it. All the cards start in site 1, and we print them color-coded by rank, so it'll be a yellow card or a green card or a blue card, but also then file them alphabetically by last name. And the student's responsible for pulling the card out and then lining up. And when the class lines up, if anybody's missing a card, you know, they're sent back over to program director or branch manager to figure out why they're missing their card before they get in class. So if you have, you know, a testing issue, you have a billing issue, anything else, you know, that could be the cue to go back. But then once they've attended the class, I would always have it be the instructors using them for whatever they need, the stripes and progress checks and stuff. Then if I'm the program director, I always had a box on my desk, and they were required to be in my box within about 20 minutes of class starting, because I wanted to be able to go through and look at retention issues, billing issues, you know, anybody who needed to be renewal prepped, all of that stuff, you know, while the class is still actively in progress, not at the end of the day. But then what happens is it gets, and you know, if you have a software, we would keep them all for the day so they don't get filed in the middle of the evening. Then at the end of the night, at our end of the night recap, we can go through all the cards and see if there's anything we need to talk about, you know. So we can briefly talk about each and every person who came in that night. And there may be one that's a problem of some sort, one that's a renewal prep, and so forth. But we can go through and talk about them. Then they get filed on that side too, right? Now, what I know then is, let's say on Wednesday, I know everybody who didn't come in Monday and Tuesday. One of the things I want to know have on the ID card is what their 2 days a week are. So I can go through the one side and know everybody who missed the Monday class or missed the Tuesday class. And I can then call them on Wednesday to schedule a makeup, or I could call them at the end of Wednesday. So everybody missed Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. What we tried to do is we tried to have it be when they missed Monday at 6:15, we called them, Monday at 6:20. Never actually pulled that off. That turned out to be a little too optimistic. But we were able to get it where on Wednesday, we called everybody who missed the Monday or Tuesday class. And on Thursday, we could get everybody who missed the Monday through Thursday class. And then on Saturday, we could call everybody who missed, for the week. And so we were right on top of it. And being that on top of it is so that if they miss Monday, you can get them scheduled to come in on Thursday. So they still make it on Wednesday and Thursday, and they don't fall behind. Does that make sense to everybody? But then what happens at the end of the week, all the cards that are still in one, which we want it to be 0, but it never is, right? Then they get pulled out, and there's another box in the office or at the reception desk that 1 week, a 2 week, a 3 week, and then a 4 week plus, right? But then what we would do is put them in the 1 week, and everybody who's in 1 week moves to 2. Everybody who's in 2 moves to 3. But then we knew by stats that I always knew with our staff, if it was 1% or more in the 3 week box, we had a problem. And if it was more than 2% in the 2 week box, we had a problem. And if it was more than 10% in the 1 week box, we had a problem. And that was our rule of thumb, was 10%, 2%, 1%. Now, 1% correlates to 4.2% a month dropout rate, because it's 4.2 weeks a month. So even 1% in that box, right? So if there's, even 1 or 2 cards in that box is reason to panic. But I don't want to ever let the 1 weeks get into 2 weeks. I don't want to ever let the 2 weeks get into 3 weeks. And I don't want to let the 3 weeks get into the, the dropout, right? So as Master Smith was saying, I could have 3 benchmarks during the week on when we're going to do outbound calls. I do my call, leave a voicemail, send a text, send an email on that. I could then, at the end of the week, mail everybody postcards, personal letters, one thing or another, right? But it's important to be at it really up front. Nick Kokinas used to say prophylactics versus therapeutics, but I'll see people who, especially like MMA schools, they'll say, oh, yeah. If somebody's been gone 2 months, we try to call them. Well, my experience is somebody's gone 2 months, they're gone, right? Very difficult.
Or what I always heard is, well, when they don't make their payment, I call them.
When their EFT doesn't clear, yeah.
Yeah, that's when they get the call. Well, the parents see through that, because some of these people that aren't coming are still making their payments. So they might not ever hear from you, because I know some people would say that they count their dropouts are by the ones who don't make the payments. See, that's not a retention system.
Yeah. And in fact, to expand on that, is I always went through our billing reports and marked them active and inactive, and then marked them ABC. And then in projecting what our billing was going to be for the next month, I made the staff take out every number for anyone who was inactive and everybody who was a C student. Plus, we looked at everybody who only had 1, 2, or 3 payments left. So if they were almost paid off on their current program, that number came out. If they were inactive, that number came out. And if they were a C student, that number came out. And then all of a sudden you have a realistic number. Well, I collected 60,000 this month, but I got 10,000 of people who, really aren't very solid. Okay, well, I either better get them to be solid, or I better write another 10,000 because we're getting ready to take a big hit, right? Or, I've got, only 500 of payments that are going bad, and we have 5,000 in new billing that we bill, right? Is that making sense for everybody?
Can I ask Master Oliver,
Yep.
Is there anybody who's not using that physical class ID card on a daily basis? Melissa's not?
We
who are
don't
you?
have one with a picture. We have just the boxy one.
I didn't catch that.
We don't
Okay.
use one with a picture. We have the attendance card regular, but no picture.
Yeah, some do a picture, some don't do a picture. The picture helpful, we found with the staff to get to know, to associate a face with a name. Even when they're not there, they get to know who that person is when they're looking at the card where they have questions. But that is helpful. Bob, could you pull up one of the cards and show everybody, and then maybe show them where they can print it off if they're not using it?
Just as an FYI, I actually wrote to Bob about this just a minute ago. The format, when you try to download this, doesn't do it properly. I think it needs to be shared, for me anyway, as a PDF, and then futz with it from there, because I can't get it to work. But we can start using this. I mean, it's a really good idea, so why not start doing it right away? So as soon as I get it, we'll start using this system too.
Yeah, it is saved as a Word doc on there.
Melissa, I'll
Merrick-
post one on the Facebook that I had to retool because I had the same problem.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, that would be really nice. I don't know who's talking, but I appreciate it.
That's
It's Alexia.
Alexia.
Yeah,
I'm the
yeah,
weird
but-
ballet person in the group.
yeah, and if you post that, Lexi, we'll put it in the member site and stuff as well. And Bob, you can have Merrick figure out what's going sideways. What we try to do is we'll end up with a lot of stuff that's posted as PDFs. We try to get it posted in editable format, so it's easier. Of course, nowadays you can do a lot more with PDFs than you used to be able to. But Bob, stay on the top side of that card for a second. Yeah, there you go. So see, what I ideally would like to know on this card is what their 2 days a week are. It's got student name, who the parents are, size and color of belt, right? But usually we would do a little picture of them here on the card as well. And in practical terms, if you go through like one of the Mile High schools, a lot of these are kind of sloppy. But what I want to do is know, like 1, 2, I'll have little hash marks there to know that whether they've been taking class consistently twice a week, or maybe, they came once in a week, missed a week and a half, and then made it up. All of those things, what we'll do is date stamp it. So I have a picture of what's going on when I look at this. Does that make sense? And then you see we're doing a little progress check and a stripe at the after 8 lessons. Same thing after 16 lessons, which, the way we're doing the rotating curriculum would be in most cases their first belt, and then their second belt, and their third belt. That WTS and POW means, and this one's probably more complicated than most people would use, but that's a little check mark for they've done the What to Say When You Talk to Yourself book, and a little check mark that they've done the Psychology of Winning book, which are 2 books we use for white belts, and would, actually just give it to them when they enroll so that they have them. Any questions on any of that before we shift gears here?
I'm sorry, I might be being a little thick today,
Go
but
ahead.
I don't get where you track the attendance.
Oh, it's each of those boxes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
You
Is
write the
that-
date.
Is they would be dated, either a date stamp or just dated in the box, right?
Okay,
So on their
Okay, I
first
see.
class, they come,
I got it.
you pull the card out. On number 1, you'll write in October 29th. Today's their first class. Then their next class is on November the 2nd, and then their next class. So each time they come in. So in our school now, some schools have to do this a little differently because they have more lessons. Maybe they're not testing on a 2-month cycle. Maybe they're testing on a 3-month cycle. But this is designed for a 2-month cycle testing. So they're getting their black stripe is their progress check. The gray stripe is their character that's down here. See where they're getting the books? They check off down there when they're getting the books. And then you do it again on the second one. And that second stripe, that second black stripe, we call that the pre-check. That's the pre-test. So their second progress stripe is the pre-test before they take their final exam.
Okay.
Sometimes that's on the 16th lesson. Sometimes it could be on the 15th or 14th. Same thing on that month one. That black stripe for their first progress check might be on 5 or 6 lessons. So whenever you're looking at them, and then you'll go down and you'll mark off on the black stripe that they received it. So now I can look at everybody's card and know who's had a progress check. And if I see somebody down on 12 or 13 classes and I see that they didn't get a progress check, then I know they're going to be behind in their testing cycle.
I see. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, just got a little confused there. Thanks.
Yeah, that happens. And then Bob, you can stop the screen share there. Unless there's any specific questions on that.
Can I see what's on the back real quick?
Yeah. Scroll down, Bob.
Might have to flip it.
Upside down.
Oh, I see. And then this is great. Okay, thank you.
And you
I
flip that,
appreciate
Bob?
that.
What's it doing to you, Melissa, when you download it? Is it not looking, does it not look like this?
Not even close. It like has a green column here and then over here it has
Oh,
a.
you know,
little
when I
piece of
do
that.
that, Melissa, if I do that, if I'm on my Apple and I do that, if it's on it, I don't know whether it's the PDF or the editable one, either one of them doesn't work. I think the PDF works, but the editable doesn't work when I'm on Apple.
Well,
It has to be-
to clarify, Master Smith, you're saying when you're on your tablet, not when you're on a Mac.
Yeah, not on a Mac, on my iPhone or on an iPad.
An iOS.
Yeah.
operating
I just
we just
don't have Word.
we have to translate. We have to translate Jeff Smith.
Oh, that's what it is. You don't have Word.
Computer speak.
No, I don't. I haven't. I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, download words.
She's in Seattle in the home of Microsoft, and therefore eschews all Microsoft products. What I'm hearing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I'm more or less on that same page. But anyway, okay, but let's go back to the numbers that right. So the active count percentage we've been throwing around is a really important number. Let's take Jan, if I have 300 active, and if I lose what most martial arts schools do, what Steve LaValle did for years, what Dave Govar's numbers were, et cetera. If I'm losing, say, 7% a month, that means with 300 active, I need 21 new enrollments every month just to stay even, right? So I have 300 active, I lose 21, I add 21, I've made no headway, I'm exactly even. What our target is, and what realistically we've seen happen, is you can get that number with even a big school to between 1% and 2% a month. Master Smith said 3%. 3% is still a good number. So with 300 active, 3% loss means you need 9 enrollments a month, not 21 enrollments a month, right? Big difference. So if I did 21 enrollments at 3% a month dropout rate, I just gained 12 active students. I went from 300 to 312. On the other hand, at 7% dropout rate, I went from 300 to 300. I'm flatlined, right? So, but the key components of retention are not about how exciting the floor is, how fast-paced and motivated it is, how vertically the instructors can kick or whatever. None of those are the components of retention. It's the external thing that we see. And we see somebody who's an exciting instructor, we go, oh, wow, isn't that it? exciting and it's so, but that's not it. What we have seen over and over and over again is it's about two things. It's about rapport, in other words, relationship. They immediately feel comfortable, they're welcomed, they're greeted within 3 foot of the door, you use their name every time, you make eye contact, you remember their birthday, you remember other holidays, they're engaged, you like them, and therefore they like you. That's number one. Beats everything else. Number two is goals. It's starting them off and setting the goal to be a black belt, and then having them formalize that goal. If you have goals in place and relationship, in other words, it's much more important to have nice people. It's much more important we talk about fighters, and this guy or that guy is a great fighter, they're a champion, they do this, this person is such a model of performance. If that person's an asshole, nothing else matters. If that person is self-centered, nothing else matters. If that person is an empathetic, sincere, warm, engaging teacher, then I'd rather them be very talented. But I want them to be a warm, sincere, engaging teacher who truly cares about each and every student and each and every parent.
And
right?
that's what I used to tell my staff, it's one of the hardest things though to teach somebody, because you're really teaching them how to care. Yeah. And it's a personality thing. So that's when I started the spotlighting and marking the cards, is because I found that even the ones that didn't have a rapport or didn't know how to be warm and fuzzy, when they would spotlight somebody and say how good they did and brought them up in front of the class, they would automatically like that instructor better. Why? Because that instructor was praising them. And that's the key to developing that rapport, is praising them. And I tell you, when you send or you recognize their birthday, we had their birthday on our ID cards. And so when it was somebody's birthday, we would all sing happy birthday and make a big deal about it. And that develops rapport too. I mean, that makes them feel special too. So it's just that caring feeling.
Yeah. Well, but there's a great book, and all you need to know is the title to tell you the truth, but it's a great book. It's called The No Assholes Policy. And Matt Smith, going back to what you just said, you start with don't hire assholes. And if you got some, fire them. And that's true of students, parents, and especially staff, right? So if there's somebody that you tolerate, who grates on people, who's difficult, that the people have to, get to know them. I mean, you'll really like them once you get past. No. You don't want that person on your payroll, period. Right? So I always start with that. And then there's all this technique-y stuff, Master Smith. But I remember years ago, Bob, you know Gran well, you may remember Gran, but Gran and I were kind of working together with his janitorial supply, and he had gone and spent like $10,000 on Zig Ziglar products and bought all the videotapes and all of that stuff, which I immediately talked him into letting me make copies of everything. So I had all the stuff too. And a year later, we were using it for all of our staff constantly, and the notebooks and everything. I said to Graham, how's it going with all the Zig Ziglar stuff? He goes, well, that didn't work worth a shit. I said, well, what's the problem, Graham? He goes, I realized I had a bunch of assholes working for me. As soon as I fired the assholes, everything else worked out better. Well, that's exactly right. The ones who don't have the personality for it, the ones who are assholes, you can't fix them. You got to just not have them to begin with, right?
Their excuse was they're lazy. They would say about the students who weren't doing well because they didn't motivate them or reach them. No, they're just lazy. No, they just can't do it. They can't pay attention. They have a learning problem or whatever their issue was, rather than try to solve the problem and help that person.
I had an instructor one time, and again, it's one I should have fired before I did, but I walked in and he had Heine written on some of the cards, HINEE or something like that. And he had gotten it from LaValle. And I said, what the hell does that mean? Oh, it's, hey, I'm not excited enough. And I said, well, why is that on the card? He goes, oh, those are the ones we're not going to try to renew because they're just not excited enough. I said, do you realize that the person in charge of getting them excited is you? And this is not a rate them and decide not to pay attention to them anymore. It's a rate them and decide what it is you're doing wrong that got them there to begin with, you know? But he had missed that point, that it was like his responsibility, not their responsibility to bring it to the table. It was his responsibility to fix it, right? But, you know, I think, you know, after years, you can't fix assholes, right? We try not to enroll assholes. If we find out that we misjudge, we try not to renew them. If it's a you know, father, mother, or the kid, we hold the kid responsible for the parents. I don't do any more rationalizing the kid's great, but mom's a bitch on wheels. No, we get rid of them. You know, the mom is great, kid's great, but the dad is such a prick every time he walks in. No, they're gone, right?
I like Lexia's clap for what you were saying. She put a little clap up on her. On
I missed that. Yeah,
Then put it back.
Yeah. But same thing with staff. I mean, in like tenfold is, and I read a great book by Tom Peters years ago. He wrote In Search of Excellence, Passion for Excellence, all those. And in one of those, he tells a story, and it's about an accounting firm. He said, you know, very controversial at the time. They went through all their clients and who was a pain in the ass at billing, who was a pain in the ass to deal with, who was it people just didn't like to deal with. And they fired the bottom 20% of their clientele, and everything improved. And it really is true. If you have a population of people who are not the right fit, it's much better off to just flush and get rid of them and then build up with the right people. But especially when it comes to renewal and staff. And sometimes it's painful because you have somebody, you go, well, you know, he's great once you get to know him, or she's great once you get to know her, and she's so talented, and, you know, and people just love to watch the performance. No. You know, don't hire assholes. Bob, it's my reaction to many of our old Oklahoma and Texas guys is, okay, yeah, very talented, but he's an asshole. I don't want to hear about him. You know, I don't care to hear about drunks, racist, or other versions of.
And one of the reasons why we told everybody you don't have to renew everybody, as a matter of fact, you shouldn't renew everybody. You should renew about 80%, because the other percent, you don't want them in that black belt program and have to deal with them that many years. You know, your goal in that beginner program is to find out who are the ones that are worth working with, and those are the ones you want to invite. And that's why we made the qualifications. You know, if we didn't invite them, and I've had some of the assholes come to me and even ask, how do we get into the black belt leadership? And I would be honest with them. I would say, well, here's what you're going to have to change. And until you do that, you can't be invited in. And a few of them did change because they didn't realize that they were that big of pain in the butt.
You're going to use a different word, weren't you?
Yeah.
And so, but the last piece on that subject is the way that we're computing what your percentage monthly dropout rate is. And it's just as simple as, with 300 active, how many do you need to replace every month to stay even, right? But really what that number is, if you go back, not the 1, 2, 3 week box, but if right now I looked at how many last attended in September, then I looked at how many last attended in August and how many last attended in July, I would know then what my percentage of total active was that dropped out in August, what my percentage of total active was that dropped out in September. And that's literally is, if I have 10 cards of people who last attended in July, and I was at 300 active to keep it easy for me to do in my head, that means I had 3.3% dropout rate. Does that make sense? The number of people who last attended in that month divided by what the total active count was that month.
And just to clarify for them, Master Oliver, on October 1st, when you count how many cards are active, and remember that's week 1, 2, and 3 also are still active, even though they're in box 3. We count the people that are in week 1, 2, or 3 at the first of the month. And then I add how many enrollments I had in October. That means on November 1st, I should have whatever my October count was, plus all my new enrollments, and that would be my new active count minus then the ones that haven't been there for 30 days. And that would give me my new active, total new active count.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
you could figure the percentages on how many of those you should have had this many. This is how many you have. This is how many you lost. Now you can figure out the percentage of what percentage of that total amount dropped out based on what that adding and subtracting is.
Yeah, but what if you go back to how many last attended in July, how many last attended in August? If you then average those numbers out over the year, you'll have an average dropout rate. Because we all know, you might have a little bit of a spike in July, you might have a little bit of spike in December. There are times when it's a little bit more difficult. But what you're really concerned with is what's my average of those numbers. Any questions on that? We're getting kind of long-winded. I should note, too, there was, I think, a little bit of a miscommunication. The behind the scenes of the Black Belt test meeting was originally designed in the year for this to be a quick start meeting for new people. And then what happened is with COVID screwing things up, we turned it into a quick start plus level 1 plus level 2, plus, leadership mastery. And now it looks like, I haven't got a definite confirmation, but it looks like the state of Colorado and Summit County have conspired with us to wipe it off the map. We will have a confirmation on that today, but they just put out a new directive that no more than 10 people in a room, that have to be from no more than 2 different families. If that's accurate, then we'll be canceling out next week. So, I apologize for that if you had booked
Kyle,
tickets.
don't cry, Kyle. Don't cry.
But yeah, COVID is conspiring against us on some of this stuff.
Paul should
Yes.
just move it to a state where they don't have the crazy regulations for like 2.5 seconds.
Yeah, that's a very reasonable solution.
Except we couldn't move all the black belt. This was going to be because it was the black belt testing at this same time, because we want everybody to see how we do that. And so that's why it was going to be there at that time.
Until this point, Colorado has been relatively rational. But this whole year has certainly, I think, made anybody who's in California, Michigan, New Jersey, or New York want to move to Texas or Florida. The problem is similar things years ago. We had all the Californians move to Colorado, and now Colorado is resembling California. So I will say, if you move and disgust, don't take all the things that you were disgusted about and recreate them where you moved. Because
Oliver, if we want to, we are still looking for a plan B. But
from our meeting standpoint, let's assume there is no plan B for this meeting.
Yeah, I was going to tell them if you're going to move the location of the black belt testing and they wanted to come, that would be one thing. But if you're not going to have,
I don't think, if we do, it's probably 2 different schools do different things, or they go virtual or something.
okay, so it'll be spread out.
And therefore, any benefit of coming and seeing it beyond what we could do by Zoom would be off the table.
Okay, so then is that an official cancel?
No, but it likely will be by the end of the day.
Okay.
We still have calls into the hotel and the meeting facility. So if we're meeting, misreading regulations.
Can't you call it a peaceful protest?
Yeah. Yeah, then
Wait,
we
I'm wondering, is there a way we could potentially have I'm actually fortunate. I've actually come down before to see.
Yeah.
But I'm sure your systems have improved over the years. And is there a way that parts of it maybe could be videoed?
Yes.
Or
well,
something that it doesn't matter where it's held, I can't come. So,
Right.
So I would love to
Yeah,
be able to
nor
see.
should you right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's going to be two in parallel. There's Ripple Effects, Greg Macy, which we usually combine them. He's doing it all virtually, and we'll try to get it broadcast into the group to see what he's doing. And the Mile High one, we were already planning on trying to broadcast it virtually as well. The question is, by the time all this stuff gets done, is there anything that's, I mean, watching a bunch of brown belts in their living room doing stuff isn't very interesting.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. So,
Master Oliver, could we then officially say that you will post on our Facebook page the final decision tomorrow morning?
yeah, or well, as soon as I hear today sometime. But I'm guessing we're done this round. So sad but true. What I will do though is I want to do another round of what we did with the Leadership Mastery, Master Smith, and do complete marketing plan for first quarter. I thought we didn't get far enough through that as well. So by end of November, we'll revisit first quarter marketing plan and really put that together in a solid way. And I'll put together a date for that tonight or tomorrow as well.
Okay, and in the meantime, everybody, again, just a quick recap, make sure that you figure out in your school what your student value is and figure out what your highest price of your program, in your leadership with the White Belt Scholarship, and what your basic program price is. So you can then divide that by 2 to get what you're working towards to get your student value should be somewhere towards that. In the neighborhood of 300 is what we're looking for. Then make sure that you go through your dropouts and your active count, make sure. And as Master Oliver said, all of those stats for leads, appointments, see, if you don't know all those, there's no way then to know how to spend your marketing properly. There's no way to know how to correct if you have a problem with getting enrollments where the problem is. So it's really the solution to almost everything we do is it goes around knowing your numbers.
Yeah, but let me reasonably respond to Bob's snarky comment for a second, Bob. It's amazing to me how coronavirus became, a political and a polarizing thing. I would, if you had told me a year ago there's going to be a pandemic and there's going to be people on opposite sides based upon their political affiliation, I would have told you were crazy. And so what we have to deal with in our schools is not our personal belief system, but it's getting the average soccer mom to feel comfortable with the environment for their 7-year-old. My 12-year-old would have spent 24 hours in the hospital again with serious asthma. And I can go through the numbers, and we did this with our meeting the other day. What we know is, I think I posted it, what percentage of deaths by COVID are under 25, what percentage of the population, what the likelihood of there being anything. What we know is if somebody is 65 and up and they have diabetes or some other illness, certainly Melissa during your treatments right now, et cetera, that's a real problem, right? And there's no politicization about it. A 7-year-old with diabetes shouldn't be getting on and, going out in public, et cetera. But what we also know is that the risk for a 12-year-old is probably dramatically less than it is from them getting hit walking across the street or having severe reaction to the flu. So there's this spectrum, and there's all this, what there is there's a drumbeat constantly on ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, MSNBC, et cetera. And there's this political thing going on. So we've got to maintain remote learning, Zoom classes, I've got the black lab trying to jump in my lap, have the classes in the park, and then have appropriate social distance in the school. The other thing, Bob, that, in all seriousness, is the only point that I see that we have any like potential serious liability is we ignore what all the state and local are doing and say, screw that, we're doing our thing anyway. And then somebody, whether it's the grandparent, the parent, or whatever, really does end up in the hospital and in worst case dies. They're going to point at wherever they can point and find somebody to sue. And that's, I think, our one liability. So if we're following the policy of what the local health officials are saying, the regional, if we're following the CDC, then it's hard for them to say, well, it's your fault that this thing happened. And if we're saying, oh, this is ridiculous and, this is all politicized and screw it, it's not a big deal. Then when it is a big deal, that's when you have a big lawsuit on your plate, which probably is going to be denied by the insurance company. That would be my guess. So I think it's in our best interest. The other thing is there is a big skew in the way that adult males think about this, the way adult females think about this. There's a different way that parents think about this than single parent. There's a different way that parents, of any level of at-risk child of any sort think about it. So we've got to be aware that we want 100% of our students to look at us and say, oh, they're doing a great job on this. And I'm the same way. I mean, if I go to a restaurant, I go to, movie theater, I'm kind of evaluating are they doing overkill? Are they doing reasonable? Is this a reasonable situation? In my son's case with his middle school, I think they've lost their mind and they're being ridiculous. On the other hand, he went to his church youth group and I was like, oh, this isn't, they're not being safe here. They've kind of lost their mind on the other hand. So even people who really know the numbers and are rational about it aren't necessarily rational when it comes to their kids, especially if their kid's asthmatic or diabetic or, some other thing that might be an issue. So all joking aside, Bob, I think it's a bad idea to take that stance. And, we're certainly not going to do that in an environment where we're going to take a couple hundred people and keep them up 24 hours a day for 3 days and have them exhausted and one thing or another on top of it. So, to give you a serious answer to a snarky question, we're probably not going to take that tact right now. And by the way, I think everybody should be voting for Trump by Tuesday. But, it's
Hey,
not,
Matt.
the world is not ending. And on the other hand, there is serious issues. So, we've got to take a reasonable approach in the middle.
And
What were you gonna say,
Master Oliver, actually, you came on a couple of minutes after, it was Paul, wasn't that right, Master Smith? He was discussing how many of his leads and current, I don't know if it was enrollments as well, but how because of his presentation on safety, that they were definitely going above and beyond, what most of the other activities that were in his area were doing. So he was actually getting a lot more traction just because of that presentation. And I did repost Delfino's video where his program director did a whole walkthrough presentation on how they're cleaning the school, wearing the masks, all of that.
Good. And on that note, we'll call it a day. Fair enough, Master Smith?
Okay, guys, have a good day. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Bye.